Hello, welcome to this lecture video. So today, we're going to talk about the topic in test and scale construction, particularly to talk about what is a test. So I'm teacher Melai. So let us start with this question. What is a test? So you might think that test, of course, is assessment. So let's ask the question, what is a valid approach then to assessment? So is it to observe everything that is taught? Well, ideally, yes, it is to observe everything that is taught. However, it is not possible for us to include everything because, of course, of too many informations that need to be recorded and too many information that needs to be processed. And the question is, how will you process the data obtained? So what is the usual situation now is just to consider one valid sample. And the usual scenario is that for us to assess the intervention, for example, in school or in teaching, or to assess the what students learn, we consider, of course, assessing or testing students' learning. So the most commonly used assessment to measure students' learning is the conventional pencil and paper test items. For concepts and for the knowledge, yes, we can use the conventional pencil and paper test items, but not all the times this can actually measure what is taught inside the classroom. Just like, for instance, how about informations, or how about skills rather learned by the given intervention? So like in music class. So it is not enough that the student can just identify what are the notes all about, or if they memorize the music. But of course, if you teach them how to play a piano, then they have to do a practical test, or of course, to show now the practical skills of the students. Or also in science. So it's not enough just to learn about the concept, but for them also, especially if it's in chemistry class, they have to perform the experiment, as well as in PE class and all other tasks, practical tasks that of course require demonstrations. Like again, also for cooking, for dancing, and all other practical tasks. So for knowledge, it is good to use conventional or pencil and paper test items, but for skills, it is not enough to use conventional pencils and paper test items, which means aside from the test, you also need to come up now with a rubric for you to assess also the demonstration of, or the practical skills of the students. Okay, so next, it is not also enough to consider just one particular item to assess one target competency. Because of course, for us to come up with a good assessment, you have to consider multiple sources of evidence. So you're not going just to consider one particular items in the test. So if you're going to use paper and pencil test, then you have to consider now a set of, let's say, 5 items, different level of difficulty, to measure now that particular indicator. So you have the parameters for you to measure the target competencies. While for practical skills, you also need to consider a rubric there, as mentioned, that will consider now different criteria. So you will not just focus in one criteria only. And another thing is that one item must not depend on another item, because the tendency for, of course, is that if the student do not know what is the answer for the first item, so the tendency is that he or she cannot again get the correct answer for the succeeding item, which is dependent to that item. Okay, so what can assessment do? So actually, we do assessment because educational decision relies now on the success of the learning programs. So we assess because we need to make a decision now whether to continue using the intervention or whether to continue using the particular school program. Because if not, of course, if not changing totally, you also need to come up with a decision for you to just to modify it for the students for maybe the coming years. Okay. And also, in the assessing now the level of skills or the level of the knowledge, you also must consider that the test that you're going to use is valid and reliable. So there are different reasons or the different ways on assessing this test or this learning programs in personally or individual. So such as why do teacher assess the students personal or in individual? Of course, the teacher needs to know the students learning. So in what particular, for instance, item or what is the extent of the progress of the students based from his or her previous assessment or scores. So that's for personal and also to check if the students now is ready for the next lesson or what are the difficulties encountered by the students. And in the school, of course, the um, principal also know have to know the performance of the different grade levels or in junior or senior high school levels for them also to give a feedback now to the regional or to the national levels on the assessment. But for regional and national level, it's quite difficult also to use just merely the assessment or the performance because, of course, first, there is a very large and it's also considered large informations and also it is expensive now to process the whole data if they will consider all the students. So what is the situation is that they just considered sample of the students, but sample of the students that they gave an assessment or in this assessment is not influenced by the schools. However, generally traditional exams are not appropriate because it cannot show the extent of the improvement. It cannot also see or it cannot reveal the teaching skills or the particular part of the curriculum where there is the loopholes. And also, another thing is that in scoring, it can be that the scoring is the rubrics used is consistent. However, there is of course a potential breaches of security, especially if you're going to use the same items of the test, just to control, for instance, that they will be given the same test to measure if there is really an progress in learning. And also, there could be some effect on variations in the scores because the score for this year might not be the same score in the next year. And also, it can be affected by their mood. So these are some of the concerns about assessment. Okay, so thank you for watching.